With that, I want to again thank you, and then I want to turn it over to Katie Fallon from the Urban Institute, who's going to share with you more about those survey responses.
Good afternoon. Can I have the next slide? Do we have somebody running slides for this? Thanks. Next slide. So the survey was designed and fielded by the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and it was open for about 2 weeks from July 21st to August 5th. And the link to the survey was posted on the portal for the Black Homeownership Strike Force. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of those survey findings today. The survey received about 1,200 usable responses. Next slide. So looking at the breakdown of those folks who responded to the survey, again, we had about 1,236 usable responses. Of those, about 78% were Black, about 7% were white, 6% multiracial, and then there was some degree of no response and other responses. In terms of where the folks that responded lived, we had the highest participation from wards 4, 5, 7, and 8, all of which had more than 170 participants. And there were also about 30 responses from those living generally outside of DC. This included people who lived in Maryland, Virginia, and then some folks who said they used to live in DC but have recently left. Next slide. Next slide. So the first question asked respondents, what were the most important barriers to Black households in the district becoming homeowners? So this was a question about what the challenges are to becoming a homeowner. And so all respondents indicated that a lack of affordable housing and available affordable housing and difficulty affording a down payment were extremely important barriers. This was followed by competitiveness of buying a home, and the location of affordable homes or difficulty qualifying for a mortgage were comparatively considered less important. But each of these was considered pretty important to all respondents. Next slide. When looking at the most important challenges by ward, so this is the same question, but these responses are just divvied up by the ward of the respondent. So that you can see when looking at the most important challenges by wards, ward 1, 2, and 8 consistently rated all of these challenges as being more extreme, which could suggest that residents that living in those wards feel those pressures more strongly than others. While respondents from ward 3 rated all challenges as being less critical than respondents in other wards. But regardless, across all wards, lack of available affordable housing and difficulty affording a down payment remain top challenges for all respondents. Next slide. So when looking at the breakdown of responses by race, so the gray bars here are just Black respondents and the blue bars are all respondents. So when looking at the breakdown of responses by race, difficulty qualifying for a mortgage and difficulty affording down payment were the most critical barriers for Black respondents. Mortgage qualification and the location of affordable homes were comparatively more important for barriers for Black respondents than for all survey respondents. So here you can see a slight difference between just Black respondents versus all respondents in terms of the challenges that they're really facing when trying to purchase a home. Next slide. So the survey also asked a number of questions digging into potential solutions, specifically those around financing, supply, and homeowner preservation. So I'm going to dig a little bit into those in the following slides. Next slide. So the first question in the solution space really asked about the importance of various solutions for helping Black households purchase homes, so really on the financing side. And you can see that across all responses, preventing discrimination in mortgage appraisals and approvals was seen as the most important solution, followed by expanding down payment assistance programs, and then creating alternative credit programs. Next slide. When looking at the same question by race, Black respondents similarly ranked preventing discrimination in appraisals and mortgage approvals as being the top priority. and expanding down payment assistance programs and creating alternative credit programs as also being important. The second question focused on solutions, looked at the importance of specific interventions to help increase the number of homes that are available for Black buyers. So this really focuses on housing supply. And the top responses included increasing the supply of affordable homes in all wards and reducing segregation, followed by maintaining housing affordability across all income groups to reduce the pressures of gentrification and displacement. Updating zoning codes and created more shared equity programs were viewed as comparatively being less important for this group of respondents. Next slide. So when comparing all respondents to just Black respondents rated almost all of these solutions as being more critical than general respondents. But they also found that maintaining affordability in the face of gentrification and displacement was a top priority, followed by increasing the housing supply in all wards to reduce segregation as being a secondary concern. And the last question asked about the importance of specific measures to keeping Black homeowners in their homes. So in this category, there was less differentiation between each of the respondents. All of the responses were viewed as being similarly important. So the goal of creating or expanding programs to keep homes in the family was viewed as being slightly more important than the others, but each of these had similar levels of urgency in the responses. So this is create expand programs that help keep families in their home, followed by creating or expanding programs that provide financial assistance for repair and rehabilitation, improving the property tax appeal system and encouraging fair appraisals, followed by creating or expanding programs that prevent foreclosures. Next slide. So similar to the supply responses, Black respondents view these again as being more important, and all of these as being more critical top priorities in terms of keeping Black homeownership. So there was a top priority on programs for renovation and repair, followed by programs that keep houses in the family, improving property tax systems, and then followed up by expanding foreclosure prevention programs. So one takeaway from the survey is that most respondents viewed each of these solutions as being critical. Some things sort of came out as being top priorities within each, but across all, the number of respondents that ranked that something was extremely important or very important was quite high across both the barriers and the solutions. Any questions about the survey? So I see in the chat, one of the questions is, are the survey results publicly available through the Urban Institute? They are not available through the Urban Institute. The survey was fielded by DemPed. And so I believe DemPed will be responsible for making survey results public. All right, there are no additional questions. I will kick it back over to the co-chairs.
Thank you for that, Katie. And so what we'll now actually go to is a video by Urban Institute. It's a really great video. It'll be the first part of the video that will really highlight and frame what we are trying to solve for and what some of the things that are going on, not just in the district, but across the country with solving this issue. And so I'll turn it over to Josh to run the video.
Homeownership is the embodiment of the American dream. In our national consciousness, the idea of owning one's home has been wrapped up with the concept of freedom itself. But beyond just a symbol, homeownership is a key tool through which families build wealth over lifetimes and across generations.
In America, the odds of having a dignified life are greatly reduced if you don't have wealth accumulation. Your housing stability is one of the biggest indicators of your quality of life.
There's equity that you're building in your home, and that equity can help to pay for starting a business, for sending your kids to school, for sending yourself to school. It can really be something that changes the trajectory of your family.
in the United States, we have a growing racial homeownership gap that should be narrowing as we move towards equality and equity and opportunity. But unfortunately, we're seeing the racial homeownership gap get worse.
The problem is not just about home ownership. Nationwide, not only do white households have higher home ownership rates relative to households of color, the homes that white households own are worth more than those that people of color own. Furthermore, homeowners of color borrow more than white homeowners do in order to purchase a home. This means that they have less home equity than their white counterparts, even when the homes themselves are valued the same.
There are so many families, especially families of color, that have not had the opportunity to participate in the great American dream of homeownership. These communities have been left behind for so long, it's going to take a long time to catch up.
There are a variety of factors at the household level, property level, and neighborhood level that start to explain some of the discrepancies in home ownership and home value. But even when these factors are controlled for, Black and Hispanic households still have lower valued homes than white households. This discrepancy is partially rooted in historical racist policies. Policies like racial covenants, which were embodied in property deeds at the beginning of the 20th century and stipulated who could and could not own a particular home. And redlining, which created systematic disinvestment in neighborhoods of color, while white neighborhoods received significant investment from financial institutions.
When my dad got out of World War II, he was able to get a near zero down, low cost loan from the Veterans Administration and buy a home. And if you were a soldier of color, you weren't able to take advantage of that financing because federal government programs wouldn't invest in a neighborhood that had even one family of color.
When you look at the history of redlining, because of over a century of disinvestment, those neighborhoods stayed poorer. They were more often communities of color, and so the ramifications continued to play out.
The same communities that were redlined historically are where homes that are in a state of disrepair and need some rehabilitation investment are the most concentrated. The appraisal industry has historically and continues to this day to undervalue the assets of homes that are in these communities.
Racist housing policies and practices continue to this day, and they impact the discrepancies we see between white households and households of color at the household level, the property level, and the neighborhood level. These are persistent and damaging trends which will only be made worse in the years ahead by factors like climate change. To tackle the structural racism that is holding back home ownership and home equity rates among people of color, we must better understand the symptoms of this broader problem, develop policies targeting the household, property, and neighborhood characteristics that so often give rise to it, and learn from leaders across the country who are making a difference in their communities.
Whether you're talking about disposable income, whether you're talking about the price of your home, all of these building blocks were laid on a foundation of structural racism. It's important that we look at them through that lens of structural and historic inequities that have occurred in our communities and how they've benefited some groups and intentionally harmed others.
The time to act is now. We are in a severe housing crisis. We need to have strong action, and a part of that should be including a lot of folks at the table that are on the ground walking it every day.
It's important to keep in mind that these effects are not static. Not only do these wealth gaps persist, they grow. And without interventions that make a more equitable playing field, they will become insurmountable.
We need to create homeownership now to deal with family success, decades, perhaps centuries from now.
Excellent. And so now we will pass it over to Commissioner Woods, who will be leading our panel on overcoming the wealth disparity.
Thank you, Tim. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. If not, by all means, please let me know. We'll go ahead and get started with our first panel. As Tim has mentioned, my name is Karima Woods. and I'm Commissioner of the district's Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. We are a regulatory agency that's charged with overseeing the financial service entities that directly impact the lives of residents and businesses here in the district. We're also committed to educating and empowering residents on topics that impact homeownership, wealth building, and also small business support. So this topic is relevant to the work that we do at DISB on a number of different levels, and honored to be a part of the strike force and to help moderate today's conversation. We've just heard in the video that wealth accumulation is essential to addressing the racial wealth gap. And so we're going to dive into that topic a little bit more in our panel. But first, I want to just take a moment to have each of the panelists introduce themselves in the order that's listed on the screen. So we'll start with you, Yannicka.
Hello, everybody. Yannicka Ratcliffe here. I am with the Housing Finance Policy Center at the Urban Institute, and the Urban Institute is very pleased to be providing data and analysis to support the strike force in its work.
Thank you. Sasha?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sasha Gay Angus. I'm the president and CEO of MANA. MANA is a 40-year-old nonprofit organization of affordable housing, and we're pleased to be here to discuss this very important topic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Babatunde?
Thank you, Karima. Good afternoon, everyone. Babatunde Oloyede, President and CEO, Marshall Heights Community Development Organization. MHCDO has been in the economic development space for over 43 years now, and one of its focuses is real estate development and housing. So we are definitely happy to be a part of this conversation.
Great, thank you. So we have a very limited time to address a set of questions. Before we do so, I do want to remind the community to answer any of the questions that are posed to the panelists in the chat, and or feel free to raise your hand to be acknowledged. Both Anna and Josh will help to facilitate the residents' answers. We do want to hear from you. We want to hear from our panelists, but we also want to hear from you directly as well. I'll also add that residents that are calling in, press *9 to raise or lower your hand, and press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. And after the panel is complete, I will ask that Yannicka preview the next video. With that, I'm going to direct our first question to you, Yannicka, and if we can move to the next slide, please. So our first question is for you, Yannicka, and I really want to hear from your perspective, from Urban's perspective, why is the racial wealth gap a problem that the district should look to address, and why is this issue of importance to you? Additionally, why should other Washingtonians care about this issue?
That's a fantastic place to start this conversation. I love this question. Why should we care? And I think you said it best. Homeownership is the primary way that households in this country build long-term financial security for themselves and future generations. This is particularly true of non-white households where the home is the largest item on the household balance sheet. These are funds that can be used for future housing, for education, for starting businesses, and for retiring under decent conditions. And if a whole segment of the community is barred from doing that, and if it gets even further out of reach, then there's a host of costs in terms of the lost potential, diminished economic resiliency and vibrancy, disinvestment in communities, displacement. And on the flip side of that, of course, there's much to be gained by enabling long-term diverse households to own a home in the district and take part in its growth. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Owning a home helps households build financial security for themselves and their children and their community. So let me arm you with some key facts about DC. This will help ground the conversation. The Black homeownership in the district is 34.3% compared to the white homeownership rate that's very close to 50%. In DC, the DC Black homeownership rate is actually lower than the national Black homeownership rate by about 9 percentage points. And in DC, it's been moving in the wrong direction. There has been a net loss of more than 3,000 Black home-owning households since 2018. And we project this trend to continue as a big cohort of aging Black homeowners in the district age out, unless we find a way to replenish those homeowning households. And it's not getting any easier to replace them. House prices have gone up by 13.5% over the last year. The median value in 2021 first quarter was over $760,000. And we've seen a large drop in housing production, new housing coming online, especially in the single family as opposed to, multifamily rentals, since this is going way back to the end of the Great Recession. We saw in the video today the racial disparities everywhere, in cities everywhere, caused by the legacy of redlining, restrictive covenants. And that's certainly a big factor between what you see living on today. You can see it in the continuing gap between the north and the west side of the city versus the south and east, as well as continuing disparities in income and job opportunities and credit scores and in wealth that lock Black households out of owning a home. Less than 10% of homes sold in the district last year were affordable to first-time Black home buyers. I'll say that again, less than 10% of the homes sold in the district last year were affordable to first-time Black buyers. And then even those who do get an offer on a home and apply for a mortgage, they are more than 4 times more likely to be denied for a mortgage than white mortgage applicants in this city. And we also see that a growing share of DC's renters are housing cost burdened, which means it's, as rents go up, it becomes even harder and harder for them to save enough money for a down payment. On the bright side, Freddie Mac estimated recently that there are about over 140,000 mortgage-ready Black millennials in the greater DC metro area. That includes all the surrounding areas, but that is certainly an opportunity area. And I look forward to hearing the other panel members talk about some of the ways we're going to reach them.
Excellent. Thank you for your response. Very helpful. You touched on a number of key points that were not only referenced in the video, but that we've had an opportunity to dive into throughout our meeting with the strike force. I do want to hear from the community, particularly around this question. And so I'm going to direct things to you, Anna and Josh, to see if we received any questions or any hands are raised from the community.
And it looks like we do have a couple hands raised if you'd like me to allow people to unmute and ask a question. So just kind of going in the order I see on screen, I have Stanley Williams. Stanley, I'm going to unmute you now. Can you hear us, Stanley?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. I am considerably interested. I have a daughter who's 30 and a son. The daughter's 34, my son is 30. Anyway, my daughter, she makes $110,000. But she can't afford any of the housing here in DC right now. And will your program address millennials like her? And also, we have my son. He's currently has a home. He's in a home right now, but he needs a bigger home. So I'm just wondering, does your program address millennials, who make what used to be a decent salary in DC, but it seems like it's not enough to afford anything here now? That's my question.
Great. Thank you for your question, Stanley. I do want to give our panelists an opportunity to address your question. I know, Yannicka, you mentioned the data that shows that there are about 100,000 millennials that are eligible or ready, if you will, to purchase a home. Do you want to go about addressing Stanley's question or any of the other panelists?
Well, I mean, I can just start again. The data point was in the greater DC area. There's 142,000 mortgage ready millennials. This means they seem to have the credit score. It does not necessarily take into account whether they have the down payment, which tends to be a pretty big barrier for many first-time home buyers, especially those who have not been able to benefit from, if their parents weren't able to own a home and their prior generations couldn't build that wealth, and they're often coming into this game with less wealth in order to make a down payment. But it does account for credit and income in that number. But that is absolutely true. We're also seeing a lot more homes these days getting sold for cash. That's not just in the district, but people who are needing a mortgage to buy a home, say an FHA loan, are often being out competed by buyers who are investors who have cash. So that makes it extra hard to compete for your daughter for example, to find a house that works for her.
Kareem, if I could jump in here, I would say that, the challenges, the barriers are great. We saw the report from the Urban Institute around, the challenges. I would say that, one of the key aspects to becoming a homeowner, for the gentleman who just spoke, is really ensuring that his daughter, his family member is educated on the process. There are a lot of programs that are available currently. It's complicated to navigate all of the programs that are available. And that's why it's important to work with CBOs like MANA and others who are able to help and walk buyers through the process and educate them about the down payment assistance programs. And there are a myriad of them. There's also a website, Front Doors DC, that can also help buyer navigate and really educate them on what's available. But it's very important to have an advocate, and having an advocate means working with a CBO like MANA, participating in our home buyer education program, regardless of what you need, whether it is just the process, whether it's preparing for becoming credit worthy, whether it's understanding all of the options that are available. There are a myriad of ways in which we can offer assistance. I think the key challenge that we're all trying to overcome is also being able to address the inventory problems. So while we may have, and MANA at this point in time, we're seeing this in our homeownership program, we have about 400 people who are coming through our virtual doors and physical doors preparing to become home buyers, but the lack of inventory for those who are even mortgage eligible is a problem. So we've got to try, we're now trying to address the inventory challenge, and I think that's part of the focus of this homeownership strike force.
Thank you, Sasha. I do want to add for Stanley and the rest of the community that answers to all questions are being put in the chat. You heard from Sasha a resource, frontdoor.dc.gov, which is a hub site where a lot of the housing programs that are available via the district government are located there, and you can answer a series of questions that will help navigate what type of resources would be available to your son and your daughter. I'll also add that the Housing Purchase Assistance Program through DHCD is also another resource, and you'll find that information on frontdoor.cdc. I'll also add for my department, Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, we work with residents to assist them on areas that do directly contribute to one's ability to purchase a home, particularly around credit, making sure that you get all the assistance that you need for for credit, so that your credit is in good shape for purchasing a home. Also, we do have other savings programs available. A lot of the information is available on our website and also via our platform, financiallyfitdc.gov. Are there any other questions?
Commissioner Woods, I just want to quickly flag that we have a number of people asking questions about how to apply for this program, and just want to make sure we can clarify for those who are listening in that the existing programs that the district offers can be accessed by going to frontdoor.dc.gov. And that any new initiatives that come out of this are based on the recommendations of the strike force. And so if anyone else wants to speak to that, but just wanted to make sure that clarification was made.
Commissioner Woods, if I could just add, I think that Sasha hit the nail on the head by saying that there are a lot of existing programs that we just need to direct DC residents towards, and working with community-based organizations really will take a great step forward in giving you all those resources and having a better understanding of what is out there. It is definitely a competitive landscape here in the District of Columbia just because of the lack of the inventory, but I think that you can still navigate it. There are still opportunities out there. You just have to be a little more patient and working with your housing counselor and with these organizations will definitely be a right step in the right direction. What we're also seeing is that people are getting a little frustrated, right? It's a little challenging. And so that's another reason why working with a housing counselor who could help serve as that motivator to keep you engaged, to make sure that you are doing what you need to do to stay in the game, I think would really go a long way. So to Mr. Williams's question, there are already existing programs out there that are very good and very effective. And through the strike force, we're going to come up with additional solutions to this issue.
Great, thank you, Babatunde. Anna, Josh, may I move on to the next question, or are there other questions in the chat that we need to address?
We have a number of people who are either have their hands raised or have put questions in the chat. I would suggest moving on to the next question, and we will get back to our participant questions after the next round of questions.
Great, thank you. Just to build upon what was just shared by both you, Sasha, and Babatunde, each of you have organizations that work directly with district residents, particularly around homeownership. And so I'd like to get a sense from you both, how are you addressing, or how will you address the issue within your organization to help meet the goals that have been set forth by the strike force? And we'll start with you, Sasha.
Okay, thank you. Well, first and foremost, I think that, being at the table in partnership with the district, with housing practitioners, with residents, in trying to identify, and with the experts. I mean, we got a lot of data from the Urban Institute, so we know what the barriers and the challenges are. But coming to the table as public-private partners is really a great start to really collectively trying to address this issue of the racial wealth disparity in the district. This is systems change work. None of us can do it alone. And so we're doing it. We're trying to do it on a really big level with intentionality. I think organizationally, I can say that, at MANA, we've been doing this work for 40 years. I mean, we were, one of the few developers in the city that really was created to help people become first-time home buyers. And when we first started 40 years ago, even in the 80s, the 90s, it was a lot easier. Our city has become a lot more prosperous. It's become more expensive, and its costs have gone up, and it's a little bit, it's more challenging to develop affordable housing and affordable homeownership housing, to be specific. But we just went through a strategic planning effort internally, and we brought in external stakeholders and talked with our board and staff, and we are doubling down on our commitment to increase our homeownership production in the District of Columbia. We want to increase our production by 25%. And in order to do that, we're going to have to, put other things in place to implement that strategy. We're also really expanding our work in the Homeownership Center in partnership with our public partners, DHCD and HFA, and really want to, do what we do better, and continually provide the outreach, the education, whether it's one-on-one counseling, whether it's group education, whether it's credit counseling, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's really just helping people to complete the 8-hour home buyer education course that they need to qualify for HPAP. We want to be there as a resource and a guide to help people navigate the process carefully so that they can complete the process of being a homeowner in the end. And we're doubling down on the efforts. We're very committed.
Excellent. Thank you. Babatunde?
I think one of the beauties of being a community-based organization is that you're constantly getting feedback from the community, right? And I think that is going to help us as an organization as we move forward. We already know that it's all hands on deck for this. This is a priority for the organization to increase Black homeownership. We've been talking about this for years and really trying to drive home everything that we need to do internally to increase those numbers. We too are working with the public sector to make sure that all of the resources are known to the residents of Ward 7, but there's also another piece of this. There's the advocacy piece, right? And the advocacy piece in terms of working to get projects that are for homeownership, right? Moving from a rental focused mindset to a homeownership mindset from both the public sector and the development community is key as well. And Marshall Heights is working towards that, right? We're meeting with developers and saying, hey, we're looking to do development deals for homeownership. We're really trying to change that mindset. And I think that will go back to the inventory issue that we discussed earlier, right? If we can get more units online for homeownership, I think it'll make the opportunities for residents who are looking to purchase in the District of Columbia have a greater likelihood for success.
Excellent. Thank you both. So what I'm hearing is that each of your respective organizations are really working towards addressing some of the goals that have been set forth by the strike force, including around increasing home ownership, one-on-one counseling, credit counseling, financial literacy, advocacy, etc. So thank you very much for sharing that information. I am going to direct things over to the chat and to see if there are any responses directly to that question, if there are any representatives from the community that represent organizations that are also working to address this very issue as well.
So Commissioner Woods, no one has answered the question directly in the chat, but we do have people who are waiting to ask questions. And Josh, maybe you can help us with the next person.
Sure thing. So let's see, let me pull up the participant queue. Looks like we have about 19 people with their hand raised. So Michelle Payton, I'm allowing you to unmute. Can you hear us, Michelle?
Thank you. Yes, my name is Michelle Payton, and I am a resident here and a homeowner for many years. And I'm grateful to be able to do that, to have done that. But like I've already heard about children that you have. And I'm grateful to hear that we really should go, they should go and seek out some community organizations like MANA, and heard about HPAC. I think my sister went through that process to get her home in Northeast DC. But I also like to mention that when I tried to go to the chat, it said disabled. So I have not been able to put anything in there. So I don't know if that can be corrected or something like that. So I'm also looking at areas for my children to be able to be homeowners.
Thank you for that comment. And we also encourage you to go to direct your children to frontdoor.dc.gov.
Okay, thank you.
Is there another question?
Yes, Josh, why don't we move on to the next person? And while we do that, please know that if you can please press the Q&A button, and that's where you're going to put your questions.
Okay, so next up I have Brenda Monroe. Brenda, you are unmuted and allowed to speak.
Hi, I didn't have no question though.
Oh, okay, we can.
I'm just listening. I didn't raise my hand.
Apologies about that. We can move on. Next, I have Brian Watson. Brian, can you hear us? Brian? Possible he stepped away. Okay, moving through the queue. Next, I have Janice Green. Janice, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Janice, go right ahead.
Hi. So I am a minority real estate broker here in Washington, D.C. I actually do a home buying program at Petworth Library that we have been doing since I started my company 3 years ago. I've noticed in the district more times than not, when we're dealing with the programs and helping people to understand and navigate these programs, when it comes to inventory, we're finding that because of the stipulations put on how much people can spend, a lot of times that means that they need to go into more of a condominium situation. And that's fine for most. But unfortunately, a lot of the condominiums in the Washington, D.C. area are not FHA approved. So for a lot of these home buyers that are approved for programs and are approved for FHA products, we get to the condominium phase, and you'll see if you go onto the HUD website that most of the condos that are existing in the District of Columbia are not FHA approved. And I think that's a huge problem because, you know, these people will build a condominium, they will do everything that they need to do to go through the checklist to be FHA and VA approved when they're built, but they don't keep up with all the things that they need to do to continue to stay within regulation to be FHA approved. So I think that if we find some way to go through the community and start, I don't know, some sort of enforcement or list of all of these condominiums that are existing that could possibly be affordable for these individuals that have these FHA loans, we would see a great deal more inventory come into view for some of these home buyers with these loans. That's all.
Thank you, Janice. Great point, great information, and something that the strike force can definitely look into a bit more. I don't know if any of the panelists have any response directly to that comment. Hearing none. Anna.
I'll just say that I'll add that I think there may be a number of reasons. I don't know the reasons, and I'm sure they're varied. I think really good governance with condo associations are a challenge, but important, and that's why stewardship in terms of guiding condo associations, especially those that consist of first-time home buyers, is really important, so that in terms of running the building, they're aware of all of the factors and have support in place to keep the condo buildings up to par. And then I know that the district also has the HAF funding, which assists existing owners with, outstanding, whether it's condo fees, etc. So that's also a resource. It's just offering that as a potential solution for some of the existing associations.
Thank you, Sasha. And I know that there are a number of responses to, I believe it was Ms. Green's comments that are also in the chat as well. I believe we have one final question. Anna, please let me know if we should move on to the next question or continue to receive questions from the community.
I think we need to move on to the last question so we can transition to the next panel.
Great. So looking at the last question, and this is really for all of the panelists, but primarily would like to hear from Yannicka on Urban's perspective around what does success look like for this initiative. There's been a lot of data shared, a lot of information overall, and would just love to hear more about what success would look like from Urban's perspective. And also, what does a more equitable District of Columbia look like, and what are the potential long-term benefits?
So I'll start by saying I don't think that there's any one single silver bullet, and that if we just do this one thing, we're going to solve the problem. And I really think the Q&A here and the conversation, the chat is so rich. It's hard to watch the panel and take in all the powerful content and all the different angles and solutions and challenges, but also ideas that are coming through. So I do feel like, that conversation really does represent what success looks like, that there's stock to meet the needs of various different types of households in the district, that the Black homeownership rate is going up and ultimately working towards parity with other groups in the city. I want to leave kind of a thought that just a reminder that the Black homeownership rate, the Black-white homeownership rate gap today across the country is larger today than it was when housing discrimination was actually legal. So housing discrimination was made illegal, and yet we've actually not made any progress on closing those gaps. So I think we have a long way to go, but hopefully up.
Thank you, Yannicka. And yes, we do have a long way to go, and we're hoping that through this very concerted effort by the mayor with the strike force, that we can slowly begin chipping away at that gap and address it here in the District of Columbia. Anna, I'll take your cue. I know we're up against time. Please let me know if you want to address any additional questions or move on to the next panel.
Yeah, there's just one question that I think we should answer at this time, and it's related to the $10 million. There are some people who are asking questions about how to apply for the grant and so forth. And I think it would be a good moment to clarify what the recommendation is right now around those $10 million. Do you want to speak to that, Commissioner Woods, or should I?
Feel free to do so.
So the $10 million that Mayor Bowser had submitted as part of her Fair Shot budget for FY23 is for October 1st. One of the charges of the Black Homeownership Strike Force is to create a recommendation on how to use those funds. So it is not currently slated for any particular use until the recommendation emerges from the strike force and is then submitted to the mayor for consideration. Just want to make sure people understood where we are in the development of that specific effort.
And I'll also add to that point, Anna, that part of the purpose also behind the town hall is so that we can solicit input from the community, hear solutions around how to address affordable homeownership through the strike force. If you have recommendations or ideas about how we should be thinking about that $10 million, feel free to share that information in the chat as well, so we can take that into consideration. With that, I think that concludes our panel. I would like to just thank all of the panelists here today. I know that there are a number of questions that are in the chat and in the Q&A, and so the team is responding directly. We encourage you to continue to share your information. Visit frontdoor.dc.gov. Visit blackhome.dc.gov around this effort. We have weekly strike force meetings. They are public, and we do encourage you to listen in on those meetings as well, and to continue to share your feedback and input on this very important initiative. And thank you for the opportunity to moderate today's panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Woods. We will go to the next video from the Urban Institute that goes into a little bit more detail about some of the things that we were just talking about here on the household factors. And so we'll start that. But just another quick reminder before we hit play on the video, please, we won't be able to, there are a lot of questions, a lot of raised hands, everyone, we won't be able to call on everyone, but please put your question in the Q&A part, and we are answering all questions in the Q&A, and we will get to everyone there, even if we do not get to your hand that's raised. Please go ahead and start the video, Josh.
To understand why white households have higher rates of home ownership and a disparate amount of home value when compared to households of color, you have to begin with disparities between the households themselves. That starts with differences in income. Across the country, white households earn more than households of color. Black and Hispanic workers are more likely to be unemployed than white workers, and they are usually the first to be fired during downturns. The racial and ethnic disparities are rooted in a history of systemic racism.
There's a significant discrepancy between incomes within the city of Minneapolis and within our region. Over 70% of people of color renters in the city of Minneapolis have incomes below $60,000. Only 20% of the homes for sale in the entire city of Minneapolis are affordable at that income. And often those homes are the primary types of homes that investor purchasers are trying to purchase. Because they have such low values, it means that there's a significant opportunity for a return on investment if you make some improvements to the home.
In our day-to-day work at Community Legal Services, we're seeing the racial homeownership gap get worse. And in Philadelphia, unfortunately, we also have a wage gap. The median wage for Black folks in Philadelphia is lower than the median wage for white folks. So what this means is it's more difficult for the average aspiring Black homeowner to save up money in order to purchase a home than the average white homeowner.
Even when you control for income and educational attainment, the housing gap persists. In fact, for those younger than 35, Black college graduates have lower rates of home ownership than white households with a high school diploma. Why?
Philadelphia, like a lot of cities in our nation, has a history of racist housing policies. We're one of the most segregated cities. It is not uncommon to go from one neighborhood that may be 80% white to go 5 blocks away and you're in a neighborhood that's 80% or 90% Black. It affects where the city invests its money.
Redlining that concentrated people of color within communities and also racially restrictive covenants that prevented people of color from purchasing homes led to concentrating people of color within neighborhoods that were also devalued There's still a tendency within mortgage companies to deny people of color applicants at double the rate of white applicants with a similar credit profile.
Even when Black homeowners qualify for a mortgage, the practice of reverse redlining is still very persistent in Philadelphia. Reverse redlining occurs when mortgage lenders offer mortgages in Black neighborhoods that have more predatory features. Mortgages being extended to aspiring homeowners in Black neighborhoods that have higher interest rates, balloon payments, have other features that make it more difficult for these homeowners to hold on to their homes and to continue to pay their mortgages.
Black and Hispanic households are more likely to have a lower credit score or a missing credit score that affects their ability to qualify for a mortgage and the price that they'll ultimately pay for that mortgage. These differences stem from a long history of racist policies and practices that have denied people of color opportunities to build intergenerational wealth from which they might build a traditional credit profile.
When you stack up all of those cards, the deck is significantly stacked against people of color homebuyers. When you have to pay more than 30% of your income for your housing payment, that cost burden can make it very challenging to save the money that you need for down payment assistance. It can also make it challenging to have the credit score that you need to have in order to qualify for a first mortgage at an affordable rate. When you're in a position where almost all of your money is going towards housing payments, it changes the trajectory of your life. You're in survival mode rather than flourishing.
To help households of color increase home ownership and home equity, we need to find ways to help them afford more valuable homes. This means thinking about policies that aren't typically considered home ownership strategies, like workforce development programs that help families of color build wealth. We also need to support households of color through programs like down payment assistance and by creating more affordable rental housing units to allow households of color to build savings. If we don't, we'll see more of what we've seen in the past, with housing wealth disparities compounding and holding future generations back.
And now we will move on to the second panel, getting to the closing table. Will be moderated by our interim director, Drew Hubbard.
Thank you, Tim, and good evening, everyone. I just want to start by saying, I've been scrolling through some of the Q&A and the chat, and just wanted to point out there's a lot of great points and questions that are being raised in the chat and in the Q&A, a lot of which has been around the discussion that the strike force has been having, getting to some recommendations to really touch on some of the things that you all are asking about or asking us to consider are definitely right in line with what we've been talking about this summer. As was stated, my name is Drew Hubbard. I am the interim director of the Department of Housing and Community Development, or DHCD. DHCD, the mission of the agency is to produce and preserve opportunities for affordable housing and economic development, and to revitalize underserved communities in the District of Columbia. We look to do that through 3 strategic objectives: producing and preserving the supply of quality affordable housing, increasing homeownership opportunities, and revitalizing neighborhoods to promote community development and providing economic opportunities. I'm happy to be joined by our panelists today. We are one short, as one had to leave for another important housing related meeting, but joining me now are Ms. Danica Scott, who is a HPAP homeowner who has successfully navigated our program in place in the district that looks to support with down payment and closing cost assistance, as well as Ronald Frazier, who is the chief of staff of the Greater Washington Urban League. The Greater Washington Urban League is one of the entities that helps administer the HPAP program on behalf of the district. The other administrator is the DC Housing Finance Agency. And the executive director and CEO, Chris Donald, was slated to be here, but had to leave to go to another meeting related to this important topic. But I want to start, Ms. Scott, if you could just give us a little bit of what it took, how you became a homeowner in the district using our programs, and just a little bit about your journey to become a homeowner in the district.
What I will say is that it was a long process. It's definitely not a short process. And it requires a lot of patience and education. I was fortunate to have a really good realtor who put me with the right program so that I could get the information that I needed, so that when I started the process, I wouldn't be like concerned about like why it was taking so long. They walked me through the process. And I think that my realtor was like really crucial in that. And that's probably because they just knew so much about the process and how long it takes. I'm in my home now, so I'm very grateful, and it'll be a month this Sunday. But just like as far as sharing the journey, it's a very tough journey, and it is also long. It's a long process. It's a lot of back and forth, but it's worth it.
Thank you for that. And Ron, I'd like to bring you in just so you can speak a little bit about your role and the Urban League's role in this, and then just maybe launch into a question related to how Scott and her sentiment. You know, in the view of the Urban League, what are residents faced with as far as obstacles with using HPAP or similar down payment programs?
Okay, I'm certainly happy to be here on behalf of the Greater Washington Urban League, and as one of the original administrators of the HPAP program, I'm certainly happy to be here. There are a number of problems or issues, challenges that residents face, and I guess chief among them has been the topic that was a part of the first panel, and that has been the lack of inventory, available inventory, even after qualifying for a home, even after working with CBOs and getting engaged in the program. There's still a challenge of the lack of inventory, which is something that these programs are not designed to assist with. But in addition to that, it's also HPAP, as was already acknowledged by Ms. Scott, is a process. And as a program, sometimes it can be challenging for persons who are not familiar with the process. So that becomes very challenging, because the expectations are you're not always able to meet the expectations, because the expectations are built on a lack of understanding or knowledge of how the process works and what the requirements are for successfully navigating through the program. Also, I would say that we've had a number of folks over the 40 years that we've been involved. There have been a number, while the lending institutions, for example, have relatively remained the same in terms of those that participate in the program, maybe one or two a year into the program, but the staffing, the agents themselves have changed. And so we've found that some of them are not necessarily as acquainted with the HPAP process, and that has also been a problem. And similarly, the sellers have not always understood the process. They're looking to sell a home very quickly, and we're fortunate that there's some sellers who want to make the sale to a resident who has come through the HPAP process. They want to do that, but there are those that don't, that they need to have a quick sale. So we've been working to try to see how we could streamline the process and meet some of those barriers.
Great. And let me just mention again, I said I was looking at some of the concerns and questions in the chat, one of which jumped out at me. Currently HPAP the highest level of assistance offered in HVAP is $80,000 in down payment and closing cost assistance. Starting on October 1st, the mayor proposed and the council approved, that number will go up to $202,000. So again, and that will be a sliding scale. So that floor will actually go up to, I know there was a question about, number one, would the level of assistance increase? Yes, based on numbers I just gave, as well as the minimum level will increase to, I believe right now, the minimum level is somewhere around $16,000. That will reset to, I believe, a minimum of $70,000 per award. So I want to throw that out, and I know we're going to have a bunch of questions that we'll go to in a second, but Ms. Scott, while we are on the topic of your journey and going through the process, you know, one of the things that I know we've discussed in the strike force is how do we get the word out and make sure folks are aware of the programs? Can you just tell us a little bit, how did you learn about HPAP? How did you get to HPAP as a viable path to homeownership in the district? How did you learn about it?
So, like I said before, my realtor recommended the program, and then the lender that he works with, that I became close with, they walked me through the entire portion. And if I had not had that lending company, as well as my realtor, I don't think that I would have successfully been able to get through the program. It's a matter of the people that you work with in the process that really makes a difference.
Yeah, excellent. And I don't want to put Ms. Scott's business out there like that, but I just want to say thank you. She was determined to be here and participate in this panel, even after going through some things in your personal sphere, but was determined to really be a part of this. And I think it's very important for folks to really see the face of someone who was able to benefit and to know that the ability is out there to do this. It's our job as both the public sector as well as our partners to make sure that more people can get to the closing table. More people have the opportunity to take advantage of these programs, that we put more resources towards making sure this program and others that we can couple it with are there to make sure the opportunities to go after those homes are there. One other thing, I want to kick it back to my colleague at the Urban League. Again, talking about inventory, talking about the wherewithal of the lending community. What else can we do to really bring the lending community into this discussion to maximize the effectiveness of the programs that are out there? I know you guys are working on that. We've had some discussions between HFA and the Urban League, but we really need to get to how do we make this a ecosystem where the lending community really knows the program and can move nimbly, and then we can move more nimbly also.
Yes, we have been working on that with HFA as well as your office, and I think that what we've kind of surmised that going forward, we want to make sure that there are opportunities for conversation, dialogue with agents, with lending institutions, to make sure that they are aware of the process and understand the challenges of the process so that they can help the residents navigate through the program. But that's where it begins. It begins with sharing that information, making sure that we're always kind of looking out for new agents who enter into this sphere. Again, because that knowledge gap doesn't aid the client at all. And so it's working with the CBOs, it's working with the lending institutions, and the particular agents that are administered or that work with these particular programs, making sure that they're always aware and even having meetings so that they understand when changes occur, things that we need to address, and getting feedback from them as well, because that's the only way that we can make improvement to the program, is to have that dialogue back and forth to make recommendations.
That's a great point. And again, for the benefit of those in the public participating who will see this at a later date, the makeup of the strike force was intentional. We have public sector representatives, we have many members from our CBO community. We have realtors, we have folks from the lending community. So all the points you're making about everyone getting at the table to talk about how do we increase Black homeownership, it was intentionally done to make sure all those voices can be brought to bear. I want to pause to see if we can bring some of the public questions in to this discussion.
Yes, thanks, Drew. Thanks for also answering some of the questions in the chat. Josh, maybe we can ask some of the folks with their hand raised to ask their questions now.
Sure thing. Apologies again, we have many more hands raised than time. But looking at my screen, I'm going to allow Juliet Chris to ask a question. Juliet, can you hear us?
Hi, good evening. I thank and appreciate you for bringing this to us. I was doing the HPAP and I did it for over a year, and it really got very frustrating for me. And when we almost think we got it, the pandemic came and closed everything down. But I'm still going to stay encouraged and keep trying. Can you hear me?
Yes, we appreciate that, and I encourage you to do so. You heard Ms. Scott say that it's a process.
Yes, I know.
So it's a process, and again, one of the things I want to stress is, the program itself has to move at the speed of the market. Again, some of the sentiment in the chat asked about how do you make sure that the programs can move quickly enough to combat speculators and those institutions that might be out there buying homes. So again, part of it is speed. Part of it is some other discussions in the strike force about how do we directly compete with these entities that are out here buying up these homes. You saw it in the video that some of the homes in the areas that do have some natural affordability attract investors because they can flip them. So, we're looking at that as a direction to really compete against those folks, to limit what they can do as far as being predatory and a nuisance to current homeowners, to really kind of pester them into selling a current asset. And then also, I think on the other end, it's worth mentioning too, again, this was in the chat, one of the initiatives in the mayor's budget that will commence in October is about heirs property, is about existing district resident homeowners and making it easier to keep those families in their homes, helping with legal fees, helping with back taxes, helping make sure that title is clear so that a son, daughter, grandchild could inherit that home without having to go through and drain their bank account to deal with the legal issues and other issues around transferring it home. So we're looking at this in a holistic way. One of the other new facets that HPAP will add to is a repair fund. So in addition to down payment and closing cost assistance, there'll be funds set aside if a home needs repair work on the front end. So we're trying to think about this across the board how we do this. So are more questions to come up?
Sure thing. I think we have a couple more hands raised. I'm going to call next on Noelle Shepard. Noelle Shepard, you should be allowed to talk if you have a question.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm a lender and I've been working with this program since 1999. And I have a couple of suggestions for things that can be done to help the homeowners in DC. I had passed some of these suggestions on to the HPAP manager, but one of the things that I feel needs to be done, especially now that you are increasing the HPAP amounts to such a high level, is some sort of restrictive covenant on the HPAP program that lets these buyers, when they try to resell, sell to another HPAP borrower. The reason we're having this problem right now is borrowers use the program and then the investors come to them and says, I will pay you triple what you bought the house for. And they sell the house, move off to Prince George's County, and then the investor turns around and turns it into a condo. And that's part of the problem we have. Secondly, I think when it comes to getting the word out, years ago, about 5 years ago, when it was just the Urban League as the administrator of the program, every month they had an NOE training class for all the new HPAP borrowers that received their NOE letter to come in and get a training, which walked them through the process. That has been disbanded. I think it needs to be replaced again. And thirdly, when it comes to the HPAP program, you need to create a list of approved lenders. Too many loan officers hear about the $200,000 and they don't know how the program works. And they just go ahead and say, hey, I can do this loan. And then next thing you know, the loan wasn't structured properly and it delays the borrower being able to purchase their home. So those are just some of my ideas. I have a few more.
Well, you'll be happy to know that all three of those and more have been the subject of discussion at the strike force, and many of those will be incorporated into the recommendations you'll see come out.
Maybe we can do one more and then we will have to wrap up. But please, if you submit your comments and questions in the Q&A, we will be collecting them and we'll be sharing them with the strike force.
Okay, with that in mind, I'm going to promote Joella Roberts to allow to ask a question. Joella, you should be able to ask a question.
Hello, yes. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Joella Roberts. I have a question in regards to how we will actually become, first of all, as Black people, because I would like to address the title of this call. As a Black person, not a person of color, how will I be able to become a owner and not a home borrower? Unfortunately, what I experienced in living in a mixed status family, which means that only a couple people in my household were citizens, is that as a Black person in America, we were not able to experience economic mobility in any way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, because we had to take out a predatory loan in 2015, my grandmother essentially lost her home. And I think that a lot of what we don't focus on is the financial stability that is necessary in order to become homeowners, or else you'll just be trapped in a cycle of borrowing, whether that's borrowing for the mortgage, borrowing for the rent, borrowing for the loan, but just borrowing, you know? And so in question, I would like to know, how do we become a part of those programs when one of the videos mentioned that their grandfather or father was able to get a house with zero down payment, you know, and the percentage was extremely low. White people have been able to access that in this country for hundreds of years. In fact, they were able to build their wealth off of Black people. So for the first 100 years of economic mobility as a Black person in America, I would like to know, how do we even the playing field, and how do we not continue this cycle of debt? Thank you.
All great points. I will start that, and then I want to kick it over to Mr. Frazier. To Commissioner Wood's point in the earlier panel, this is not just about programs for purchase, but it's also got to be coupled with that financial health, and looking at ways that folks that are financially stable and just need a bit of a leg up to go to the next level, you have something for them, but also to prepare folks to get credit worthy, to get financial counseling. You know, we're looking at this again in a holistic way, which is again why Commissioner Wood's agency and her team are a part of this discussion too, so we can look at it from kind of all facets. On the ground, I'd like Mr. Frazier just to talk a bit about how the CBOs and the Urban League look at credit counseling and the direct impact of making sure folks are ready to get in this process and can successfully navigate it.
So I would say, first of all, thank you for that, those comments and the question. One of the things that we have focused on and plan to institute is ways that we can encourage, we can't mandate, but we want to encourage folks who come through the HPAP program to participate in post-purchase counseling. She made an excellent point about purchasing the home is one point, but then after that, you've got to keep the home. And so post-purchase counseling is extremely important. And as I said, we can't mandate it, but we do want to make sure that each client that comes through the HPAP program is aware of that. In addition to that, the Urban League has developed a number of programs that look at how we look at this issue of generational wealth. And one of the things that we have started within the Urban League is our Center for Financial Inclusion. And that looks at all of the factors that go into generating wealth. It helps it includes financial therapy because there is a direct relationship between your behavior and your wealth. And so programs like that really begin to dig deep into these issues are helpful, and they will supplement the programs as we look at increasing programs like purchase assistance programs. They need to be coupled with these kinds of supportive programs, supportive counseling, supportive opportunities, educational opportunities that deal with the entire holistic approach.
Thank you. Well, I would just, again, like thank Ms. Scott for being committed to being here and just telling us about, your real world experience and showing that, if we, all of us do what we're supposed to, we can make opportunities like yours happen. And Mr. Frazier, thank you for what you do with the Urban League as one of the program administrators, as well as all the other programs that you have in place for residents of District of Columbia. So with that, again, please keep putting those great questions in the Q&A and chat. And I'm going to kick this back over, I believe, to Mr. White.
Thank you, Director. I do want to point, we have one more question, that fourth question that is also one of the questions that pops up in the chat. So I want to make sure we do get to that one as well, and then we'll close out.
Absolutely, and I can at least just raise this up real quick. This was asked about in a couple different ways, even during the first panel. HPAP is the main program for down payment and closing cost assistance. But a big discussion that we're having in the strike force is what happens to those folks that might just be a little bit over that area, that income level. And it's something we need to really look at. There have been some proposals over the years about creating more programs for really that missing middle, folks that make just a little bit over what the programs right now are statutorily allowed to service, but the need is there, and it's for a reason that was really called out in the video and through some of the other discussion. If we don't look at opportunities all on the spectrum, from the very low income all the way through working class folks, and you're going to cause pressures that lead to people being displaced and otherwise. Because if you have higher income folks that go to certain neighborhoods or areas that they may have homes that are at lower values because that's what's attainable, because they don't have a way to participate too, and it causes pressure. So we got to look at how we have programs and ability for folks all on the spectrum to really get some support, and that includes continuing our efforts in rental, so that folks can have that wherewithal to have safe and affordable rental while they build up that ability to save. And again, all the way going up to people that may be a bit over income, so that there's something there for them too.
Excellent. Thank you, Director. And so, we really do appreciate the conversation that's taking place today. This conversation does not end, and just we want folks to know that this town hall was not a one moment in time that we'll be hearing from folks. We want to make sure we remind folks that the survey, that we will still be collecting the responses that you saw, the analysis talked about earlier today, but the survey will remain open until 5 p.m. this Friday, and we will be collecting all of those responses, and that will be provided to the strike force as well as integrated within the report. Right now, there are 2 planned strike force meetings that will take place this Thursday at 10 a.m. as well as next Thursday at 10 a.m. And please go to blackhome.dc.gov to find out how to participate in those public meetings, as well as to see more about what the strike force will be doing. And so we really do appreciate the conversation. We appreciate the questions in the chat. We will continue to work to answer as many questions as possible and send those off. And we look forward to continuing hearing from you all. And so please stay engaged. And thank you all so much for attending this town hall this evening. Have a good evening.